Yeah, absolutely. It could be Satan. Probably is. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. And this is our horror movie supplement. This is what's going on beyond the original horror movie syllabus, the 100 subgenres we went through, and going to another 100 subgenres, this time a little bit more niche, a little bit more specific, a little bit more particular, and less broad maybe. But in this case, I think we're actually going with something that's kind of broad, but also just kind of maybe a little bit weird to call a subgenre, and that is horror movies about Satan, the devil. And yes, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, whatever you want to call him, he pops up quite a lot in horror movies, and we've talked about many of those horror movies. We've already talked about Rosemary's Baby and Angel Heart and Constantine and The Omen and even The Witch. Like a lot of movies where the old scratch has popped up, and we're not going to redo those movies and talk about them again because we've already talked about them before. What I want to focus on here are movies where Satan is the primary antagonist or the primary threat in the movie, and more in particular, that Satan takes some sort of interesting form in the movie. Because that's one of the things, the devil has many forms, it's kind of a saying, and that's kind of an interesting thing to see people's different takes on Satan and how he looks and how he acts and what he's able to do, how he's able to interact, what his powers are, things like that. So that was something that I thought would be fun to focus on, is movies that had interesting or fun takes on Satan and the form that he takes. And so that's the movies I picked today. These are movies we haven't talked about before, and movies that are all focused on Satan in some form or manner. And I think these are great movies. I think they're a lot of fun. I've decided to rank them in order like I always do: undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate. And in this case, we're going to go in escalating order of how unique or interesting the form that Satan takes in the movie is, and kind of how different or unusual that might be. So I think this will become more clear as we go on in talking about the movies. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and dig into Satan. So buckle up for that one. It's going to be quite a devilish ride. The first Satan horror movie we're looking at today, the undergraduate level selection, is The Devil's Advocate. Devil's Advocate came out in 1997 and was directed by Taylor Hackford, who has done some pretty prestigious movies, including the movie Ray and An Officer and a Gentleman. So a pretty established and accomplished director on this. And of course, it starred Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, Charlize Theron. It is really a pretty stacked A-list cast, and it's pretty well known and popular and kind of mainstream. But it has a lot of things for us to dig into and talk about. So we're going to go ahead and do that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about an ambitious and successful Southern attorney who gets recruited by a big New York law firm to come and do some really high-profile cases. He and his wife move to New York, and they're enticed by the money and the power and the prestige. But the owner, the head partner of the firm, is kind of a character. He's pretty strange and unusual and big personality and kind of captivating. And is he the devil? Well, spoiler alert, he actually is, and it's pretty well known even in the trailer, but we're going to go ahead and stop there so as not to spoil the movie any more than that. But this movie is famous for Al Pacino playing the devil. That is the big hook. It is something that the movie kind of toys with or plays coy with throughout most of the movie, but the trailers flat out told you this. The posters basically told you this. The advertising was very upfront about this, and that's probably a good idea because it probably gives got butts in seats, frankly. It probably advertised the movie quite well, but it also gives the audience, the viewer, an opportunity to be on top of what this movie's doing pretty early on. I would say that if you didn't know that going in, maybe you'd figure it out quicker than the movie thinks you're going to figure it out, but I think that you would maybe miss some of the fun things that Pacino's doing in his performance. And that is, amongst many good things with this movie, the crown jewel in it. Pacino is playing it huge, chewing up scenery, doing his Pacino thing, right? But it works so well here because he's gregarious and fun and frankly kind of likable and a little charming while also crass and kind of off-putting at the same time. It's actually really remarkable that he rides that line, and he rides it in such a way that you would buy into the devil being able to tempt people, to being able to entice people to do what the devil wants. And in this case, what he wants is Keanu Reeves, right? Keanu Reeves playing this Southern lawyer who's has a really incredible track record of, frankly, getting bad people off and getting them, to avoid punishment. So it's kind of clear why the devil would be interested in this. And he's playing this with like a very sweet Southern charm and an ambition, and he's likable. And he's, even though the character is torn and conflicted, you are rooting for him because it's Keanu Reeves and you like Keanu Reeves, and he's exuding a certain like naivete that you are feeling sympathetic towards. Rounding out the cast is Charlize Theron, who is doing great work as always, and this is an early role for her. It's kind of one of the movies that put her on the map, and she really is a big anchor for you emotionally as a viewer in all the stuff that she's going through, because she's not adjusting to this new lifestyle the way her husband Keanu Reeves is in the movie, and it really is creating some interesting dynamics. But what also really seems to appeal to people and why this movie has become a cult favorite, even though it wasn't the most critically loved movie, is the kind of trashy aspect of it. For all of its highbrow origins, its influences like Dante's Inferno, Paradise Lost, and especially, Faust and Faustian bargain, selling your soul to the devil, that kind of thing. Despite all that loftiness, it really is kind of a crowd-pleasing, kind of lowbrow movie in a sense. It's got its courtroom drama stuff, and it's right out of like Law and Order. The courtroom scenes are very overly dramatic and kind of ridiculous, not terribly realistic, but they're fun. They're a lot of fun, and if you like courtroom dramas and things like Law and Order, they're going to be captivating to you. But then there's a sleaze factor to this that is not over the top. It doesn't go too far, in my opinion, but it really rides that line. There's a lot of stuff in here that's pretty racy and suggestive, and really trying to lean into the lasciviousness that you would maybe expect from Satan, but also is, again, kind of titillating, kind of drawing the audience in and giving people a trashy experience in a fun way. The movie, again, maybe it takes itself a little too seriously, but it doesn't feel like it does because the subject matter is a little over the top and it's fun. And the movie never stops being fun, even though it's overly long. It's about 2 hours long and probably could stand a trim. It never feels like it loses that sense of fun, and you're in it the whole time. Like, you're really engaged because it's just kind of crazy and ludicrous, the stuff that's happening and the way things are going. There's some mystery aspects to this and some like convoluted plot stuff, especially with the law stuff, that maybe is a little too dense and shouldn't be quite so dense, but it's fine because, again, you're never far away from something kind of fun happening. This movie understands that its premise is kind of fun. The devil as a managing partner of a law firm. That's fun. And it never wants to lose sight of that, even though it does want to tackle some stuff a little bit seriously. By the end of the movie, I think they really kind of throw that to the wind and just decide to really lean into the nearly camp aspect of this. I wouldn't call this movie a camp movie, but it's got some funny stuff and it goes some fun, ridiculous places that I think is great. And I think that's why a lot of people really enjoy this. Again, it wasn't a big critical success, but the fans for this movie have endured, and I think that the reason is because it's just trashy fun. Pretty much everything about this movie works for me, from the cast to the setting to the aesthetic of everything. Even the supporting cast, Jeffrey Jones is in there, which in retrospect is kind of amusing and funny, and there's even a Donald Trump reference that has aged pretty amusingly, all things considered. So there's a lot that this movie gets right for me and works for me that I just really thoroughly enjoy it. It was one that I had a hard time finding a spot for on the original syllabus. So when I decided to expand and do this particular subgenre of the devil, of Satan, this one was absolutely positively going on the list for sure, because it's just a fun movie, and I'm not the only one who likes it. Like I said, this movie's got quite the cult following. I'm guessing a lot of you have seen it, but if you haven't, I would definitely recommend this one. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's got some racy stuff, some touchy stuff. Maybe if you're sensitive, check into that before you watch it, but I'd say this one's for anybody. It's a lot of fun. It's a campy good time. Al Pacino is stealing the show as Satan the lawyer, and it's absolutely fantastic. So check it out if you haven't seen it. The second horror movie about Satan that we're looking at today, the graduate level selection, is I Trapped the Devil. Now, I Trapped the Devil came out in 2019. It's fairly recent, and it was directed by Josh Lobo in what is apparently his feature film debut. And it's a really strong debut because it's a very well-made movie. It's a low-budget affair, but for the money he's got going, he's done a really nice job of making a movie that looks really good and really cooks with the tension. So this is one that I really want to dig into, and we're going to do that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place during the Christmas holiday, and it involves a man and his wife driving to drop in and do a surprise visit on the man's brother, who's kind of a little estranged. They're not really on the best of terms. And when they get there, he's acting very strange. He doesn't want to let them in, doesn't want to let them stay. And after some investigation, it turns out that he believes that he's got Satan, the devil, trapped in a room in his basement, got him locked up, and hijinks abound from that point forward. And of course, I'm not going to spoil the movie and tell you more, but the movie is a really interesting take on not only Satan, but on this kind of classic setup. This setup might sound familiar to fans of The Twilight Zone. There is an episode of The Twilight Zone called The Howling Man that kind of has a very similar premise of a man who believes that he has trapped the devil. And while it's not a straight remake of that or a ripoff of that, it's definitely paying homage or taking inspiration from that. And it's a strong concept to take inspiration from. This is a cool idea. The idea of the devil being trapped and what are you going to do with him and what happens while he's trapped. What does that mean? And of course, what's he going to do to try to get out, right? What's Satan going to do to try to convince you to let him out? That's where we're at in this movie, and it works really well. Josh Lobo has set up a pretty interesting premise, which again, like I said, is influenced by Twilight Zone, clearly, but he's making it his own in terms of tone and mood and aesthetic and look, and even the actors. The actors are really good here. The one that I recognize is A.J. Bowen, who we've talked about before in A Horrible Way to Die, in You're Next. He's done a lot of stuff, and I'm pretty sure we'll talk about him more in the future too. But he's great, and he's great here. He's almost unrecognizable because he's shaved the beard. But the actors are anchoring this movie and the premise of it, which is kind of a little out there. And their strong performances are making this feel grounded, even though like the concept is kind of weird. And part of the grounding is the uncertainty of whether or not it's real, right? So you've got this husband and his wife coming in, and his brother is acting all weird and kind of crazy, frankly. And you as a viewer are kind of wondering, is he crazy? Is he having some sort of mental breakdown, and has he trapped some innocent person in there? And the movie plays with that for a little while, and I think to its benefit. It's setting up this idea where you're not quite sure what to believe and where this movie is going to go. Now, it isn't that long before you start to realize that something is definitely not right. There is something in that room that is trapped in there that is supernatural, bad, whatever. And this is what I like the most about the movie, is the movie gets kind of allegorical here. So in this case, what we've got is Satan as the evil that men do, as like the tormentor, the tempter, basically the trickster. And the thing that's key about this, and this is kind of true to the source materials and stuff like that too, is that it really is trying to make you wonder. So you've got this closed door, and Satan is ostensibly behind the door, and you don't see Satan. You hear him, but you don't see him for most of the movie. And they are teasing you as to what he might look like. Could he be a regular person? Could he look like, red and horns and pitchfork and all that? They aren't letting you know, and they're letting your imagination run wild with it, and it's excellent. It's the way to do it. It's kind of the Jaws thing, right? By hiding the shark. By not revealing the devil early on and letting your mind kind of take you there, it really is a very effective way of ratcheting up the tension and building up the intrigue in the movie. It's a slow burn of a movie, and keeping this part secret or hidden from you is what builds up that anticipation, and that slow burn kind of just draws you in. It kind of keeps you engaged, and then it does pay off. The ending is very, very good. I liked it very much. I won't spoil it, of course, but it did feel like a payoff to me. I didn't feel like it didn't just fizzle out, but I did like how they had this theme of mental health versus evil personified, and they're exploring that theme. They're exploring that concept, and what does it mean? And what does the devil mean? What is Satan? What is he? And the fact that they're not showing you, but they're exploring conceptually, abstractly what he is is fascinating to me. It's really ambitious for a first-time film director, especially to tackle a subject like that. And I think they really nailed it. I think they really did gangbusters on this one. The movie winds up being a contemplation on the meaning of evil and the meaning of man and humanity and what evil is in regards to that and that juxtaposition. And I know I'm kind of talking in kind of riddly kind of talk because I don't want to spoil things too much, but it really is a thoughtful and thought-provoking movie that still manages to be creepy. It still manages to have a lot of creepy images on the TV, stuff like that, really setting the tone for something unsettling, even though it's going to draw it out a little bit. Some people might find it a little slow, too slow, but I found it to be just right. I really like where this movie goes, and I like the presentation of what they're giving me for the devil, and I think again it pays off. And I really thought it was kind of a unique or at least ambitious idea to make the devil more metaphorical and more abstract rather than a concrete, clear idea or image of what he is or what it is. It works for me. It works quite a bit. This movie seems like it got some buzz, but I don't know that it was really that big of a hit or anything like that. So I have a feeling a lot of you might not have seen this one. It's another one I would definitely recommend checking out. Again, slow burn, be forewarned. It's going to kind of take its time getting there, but it's not a long movie. And when it does get there, it's worth it. So recommend again for this one if you haven't seen it. And by all means, let me know what you think in the comments below, because this one, very high on this one. I was pretty excited when I saw this one. And so I'm glad I found a place to talk about it in the syllabus, and I hope you check it out. And the last Satan movie we're talking about today, the postgraduate level selection, is Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness came out in 1987 and is directed by the incredibly gifted and talented John Carpenter, super famous, one of the greatest horror directors of all time. And this is part of what is called his Apocalypse trilogy, which is really more of a thematic trilogy that has no narrative connection. And it's The Thing, In the Mouth of Madness, and Prince of Darkness. When we talked about the other two, now we're finally talking about this one. And not for nothing, this is a movie that I had put on the syllabus originally, and then when I started doing the supplement and realized I was going to do a Satan subgenre, I yanked it off the syllabus and replaced it so that I could keep it for here, because I really wanted to talk about it here when we talk about Satan. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a priest who recruits a group of students to join him in a church and to study and examine a mysterious liquid that's thousands of years old that's been uncovered that seems to have some interesting properties and may actually be a physical embodiment of Satan, of the devil, in green liquid form. And as the studies go on, a group of homeless folk start to surround the church, and hijinks abound as things start to go very supernaturally wrong. And we're going to go ahead and stop there again so to not spoil things too much. But this movie is John Carpenter, right? So you already know off the bat, you're looking at a strong hand directorially, and you're looking at going to be potentially a classic movie, something that's going to be well done, well directed. You're also going to see a really strong cast, right? So we've got Donald Pleasance, we've got Victor Wong, other recognizable faces. Alice Cooper shows up in this movie, which is kind of wild. The cast is strong, and it's a lot of Carpenter regulars you'll recognize if you're a fan of Carpenter. But this is an odd premise. So like I said, this is part of the Apocalypse trilogy, and I hate first of all, I have issues with the word trilogy, but I hate kind of these thematic trilogies that people are like, oh, these are all about the same theme. It feels like a bit of a stretch to me, but whatever. But those other two movies, I would argue, are much more accessible than this one. This is an odd premise. This is kind of a wild, crazy concept. The devil as liquid, as green goo, as antimatter. And that's actually, I think, part of the strong part of this movie is this idea of taking like religion, in particular Judeo-Christian beliefs, and kind of merging it with science and scientific discovery. And somehow this bizarre combination actually works. And I credit John Carpenter with a lot of that. Like finding a way to access this concept and making it work is pretty imaginative, really. The subject matter and the exposition around it is admittedly pretty dense. It's complicated, heady stuff, theoretical stuff that the average person, it's going to go over your head a little bit. And even I think, a pretty smart person can maybe struggle with this a little bit. It's not super bite-sized, not easy. And honestly, I think a lesser director, this would just collapse like a house of cards. I don't think it would work. But John Carpenter has a strong hand. He knows how to balance the strange imagery of the people outside just kind of standing around staring, encroaching on them, all kinds of weird dream things, and really spot on gore at the right times to make this still feel scary and engaging, even though there's a lot of science going on, a lot of talking going on. At some point, this movie starts to kind of go into like a possession angle, which is what a lot of like Satan related movies will go into. And so you can make an argument that this one is less devil as main antagonist, but I would quibble with that because again, the very unique idea of having the devil as a liquid and having that liquid kind of be the impetus for the possessions is pretty fun. It's a pretty unique idea. I can't think of anybody else who's done something quite so straightforward and yet also so out there and off the wall, and it works for me. It really, really does. Like, look, there's movies gonna have a lot of like people spitting up in other people's faces. There's a lot of fluids going on in this movie, and not for nothing, there is a popular theory that this is kind of an AIDS allegory. This movie being an AIDS allegory and the transmutation of a disease and stuff like that. And you know what? I can see that watching it most recently for this video. I can see that allegory. I can see that kind of concept. I don't think it was intentional, but I think that reading is valid. I think it makes sense. I think it's a defensible one. And it kind of adds an extra layer of weight to the movie, which again is a little confusing. It's a little bit of a hard read. So I can see why this movie wasn't a super big hit and critically not too favorably looked upon, but it does have a cult following. Again, I credit John Carpenter to this. It is not as accessible as The Thing, as In the Mouths of Madness, as Halloween or Christine. It's a little bit more out there. And that's part of what I like about it. And I think that's what people who are fans of this movie like about it too. It's kind of a wild out there theory. I will admit that I think it maybe tries to tackle a little too much. There's a lot crammed in here in terms of theory and concepts and ideas. There may be too many ideas in here. It's possible. That argument I think would be valid. If somebody felt like this is just too chock full of too much, I would give you that. But I love it. I think it's great. And I know a lot of you out there do love it too. I'm guessing, again, a lot of you have probably seen this one. It seems like it's pretty popular. That cult following seems pretty big. But if you haven't seen it, this is one that, again, it's not going to be for everybody, but I'd still recommend it. I just think the premise is so unique and interesting and challenging and ambitious that alone makes it worth the watch. The fact that it actually winds up being entertaining and fun is almost gravy at that point. And it is. It's entertaining fun. John Carpenter still knows how to pace a movie, still knows how to score a movie, still knows how to get the best out of his actors. It really is a well-made, fun movie that is again ambitious, maybe doesn't succeed in total with its ambitions, but does so well enough to be a unique and fun and definitely noteworthy addition. So again, if you haven't seen it, consider checking it out because it's one that I think deserves to be seen. So that's going to do it for our picks for Satan horror movies. But of course, we've got some extra credit movies to go over too because I had some extra fun movies that I wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into those right now. The first one I want to bring up is Devil. And Devil came out in 2010 and was not directed by M. Night Shyamalan, contrary to popular belief. It was directed by John Eric Dowdle. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name right, but he is the director of the Poughkeepsie Tapes and a couple other noteworthy movies, As Above, So Below. So he's done some really good stuff we've talked about on the channel already. And so he's doing good work here too, but unfortunately a lot of this credit winds up going to M. Night Shyamalan because Shyamalan produced this movie. It was based on a story that he did. So a lot of people thought that he did this one, but he did not. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But first, if you haven't seen it before, the movie's about 5 strangers who get on the same elevator in a high-rise office building, and the elevator gets stuck. And while they're in there and the security's trying to figure out how to get them out and everything like that, it becomes apparent that somebody in there is not what they seem and everybody's in danger. And it becomes a theory that one of the people on the elevator is Satan, is the devil. And you don't know which one it is. And the rest of the movie is kind of about trying to figure out which of these people might be the devil as hijinks abound. And once again, I'm going to stop so as to not spoil the movie, but this is kind of a classic M. Night Shyamalan setup, so it's understandable why people are thinking he's the one who did this, because it's got that kind of like whodunit mystery aspect to it, and you're expecting or anticipating some sort of twist to come up at some point in the movie. However, the thing about this is that the source material really is it is a Shyamalan story, but it's really coming from this concept of the devil's meeting, this idea of the devil basically judging or evaluating people by tormenting them and seeing how they act. it's really stemming from that concept and using that to tell this story, and it does it rather well. So now what we've got is the devil as an elevator. Well, not really, but the devil as a torment, or the devil as somebody testing people. And of course, what form he's in is a secret that I won't spoil in this review, of course. But the idea of the devil being amongst us, being one of us, being right there in the crowd, tempting us, tormenting us, testing us, is cool. It's an interesting idea, and this director is doing a really good job of keeping that tension ratcheted, because it's kind of a hard sell, right? You've got these people in a very confined space, and hijinks are happening, and it's kind of hard to explain this with any sense of like believability, but I think he pulls it off fairly well. Now, admittedly, there's this whole like thing about one of the security guards is a man of faith, and he is just kind of like offering up heavy exposition to explain Satan and the whole reasoning for all of this, and what it all means and what could happen. And it is somewhat clunky, awkward exposition, and that's kind of like an M. Night Shyamalan staple, really. So once again, you can maybe understand why people would think this is Shyamalan doing this, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine because it's getting us to where we need to be, and honestly, the actors in this movie are helping out quite a bit. You've got Chris Messina, Logan Marshall Green, Bokeem Woodbine, Caroline DeVernus from Wonder Falls, great show if you've never seen that. A lot of people who are strong actors giving strong performances, which helps this movie stay afloat, because again, the premise is a little thin for a full-length movie. It might have been better as a short, but honestly, I think it manages to justify its runtime. It still manages to deliver enough of what I wanted it to do, and enough to keep me invested or involved in the movie, so I was having a good time with it. Once again, I've got to give the director a little bit of credit too for keeping this premise floating, for keeping the mystery afloat and making me interested in it, and basically, letting me buy into what is ostensibly kind of a hard premise to swallow. I give it the movie its premise. I give it its premise, and if you do that, I think the movie works for you rather well. I think that if you can buy into this concept and just roll with it, I think you'll have a lot of fun. I think this movie was undersold. I think people unfairly maligned it because Knight was kind of having a bad point in his career, and his name wasn't doing so well, as evidenced by the fact that this was supposed to be the first movie of something they called the Night Chronicles, which was movies directed by other people that he would produce, and this was it. This was the only one. I guess he was going to do Split also as one of those, and then eventually he did it on his own, after, thank God, because that movie's great. But the Night Chronicles fell apart, and it's unfortunate because I don't think this movie deserved that kind of fate. I don't think it deserved the lack of love that it got, and I think people are finding it now. I think that the movie kind of came and went, but I think people kind of come across it. It's got a very small cult following, and people sit down and finally give it a try and watch it and wind up thinking it's actually rather good. It's rather fun. It's a fun premise, and they milk it for all it's worth. It's not going to be one of the greatest horror movies you've ever seen, but it's definitely worth your 90 minutes or so. And so if you haven't seen it, again, I would recommend checking this one out. Don't avoid the spoilers, obviously, because a big part of this is trying to figure out who is Satan in the movie, and it does pay off. But I definitely think this is one that's worth your time. So if you haven't checked it out already, check it out for sure. And the next extra credit movie I want to talk about is The Cleansing Hour. The Cleansing Hour came out in 2019 and was directed by Damien Levesque, another first-time feature film director. And this one is one that kind of seems like it came under the radar a little bit. It came out fairly recently and didn't seem to make a tremendous amount of buzz. Kind of seems like it kind of missed everybody's plate. And it's unfortunate because I feel like this is a little bit of a hidden gem that a lot of people miss. So I wanted to shine a little bit of light on it. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about two friends who run an internet channel where they do staged exorcisms, ostensibly pretending that they're real, and try to get views and sell merchandise and whatever. It's kind of a sham, kind of a fraud, but they're not the most ill-intentioned of people. They're just trying to make a buck and have a good time. They're having some internal problems, and then they're having some external problems when one of their last shows goes wrong, when somebody doesn't show up, and then somebody else who fills that spot might be actually possessed, and things get real and hijinks abound. But we're going to stop there so as not spoil it, of course. And this movie is fun. This caught me by surprise because this was your standard possession flick with a twist. And I would appreciate that because I love me a good possession flick, but they do kind of get a little tropesy. Let's be honest, a lot of them basically echoing The Exorcist. I've talked about this multiple times on the channel, and this one is also doing that, but it's also maybe aping a little bit more of The Last Exorcism. which we've talked about on the channel too, in a good way. You've got the devil as social media influencer, and that's a fun twist on this, right? You've got these two guys, one of which is playing the priest, and he's kind of got a background that we get into in the movie. And like I said, they're well intentioned, but they're also here to make a buck. And the idea of the devil being drawn to that, and then trying to manipulate or use that and turn people against each other, all in effort to kind of promote himself and promote, wickedness, is fun. That's a cool idea that I feel is pretty fresh and pretty neat. And I think they do it really, really well. Damien Levesque may be a first-time director, but he's shot this really well and he's paced it really well. It is rather darkly shot, but it's by design and it still looks really good despite it being dark and, of course, despite it being low budget. One of the things it really shines on is the practical gore effects that it's got. It's got some CGI in it too, but there's a lot of practical gore effects in here that work very, very well. It's really nicely done, and it adds a lot to the movie in terms of making it feel visceral and urgent and palpable. It really does a good job with this. Now, it's got a pretty strong cast. The main guy is Ryan Guzman, and then his partner is Kyle Garner, who's making a case for wonderful Scream King here himself in a lot of movies. Strange Darling, Scream, there's a lot of movies he's been in. And I've always liked Kyle Garner, and he's good here. And the two of them play off each other very well, but everybody in the movie is actually delivering pretty strong performances. What's interesting about that, though, is that a lot of the characters in this movie, most of the characters in this movie, are kind of unlikable. And that adds something to it, too, because Satan's going to start playing with them and turning them against each other. And it's easy to do so, and it's easy for you to buy into it as an audience member because they are kind of despicable people mostly. And you kind of don't like them, but you're still rooting for them to survive. You're not rooting for them to die or anything like that. So it's an interesting way to kind of introduce these characters and make them feel a little bit less cookie cutter and a little bit more intriguing. And so when the events unfold the way they unfold, you're buying into it, you're invested in it, and it works. It works really well. Now, I will admit there are a little bit of flaws in the movie. Again, the budget is a little low, and so it's mostly one location and stuff like that. That's not that big of a ding. The comedy's a little hit and miss for me. Some of the jokes don't really land for me. And some of the characters, again, can be a little grating. Again, they're intentionally unlikable, but some of them can be a little grating as that. But these are, to me, minor nitpicks because the movie really works for me rather well. This idea of confession being an aspect to the movie and drawing in views and how the devil's using it and turning it against the priest. It's fun stuff, man. Like, again, if you like possession movies like I do, I think this is going to give you something pretty fun to go with. I think this is a fresh take on something, and it's giving a little bit of fresh air into what can be a little bit of a stale subgenre, if I'm being honest. There's so many. This is why, I wanted to look for Satan movies that weren't quite so much, Exorcist knockoffs, because there's so many of them. This one felt a little different because of the devil's interest in the social media aspect, in the interest of getting views and clicks and stuff like that. That was kind of funny, but also really intriguing. And even though the ending might be a little bit eye-rolly, I still really enjoyed it. So I would recommend this one again. And again, I don't think a lot of you have seen it. I'm guessing a lot of you have missed this one because it feels like it didn't get a lot of buzz. At least I didn't find a lot of buzz on this. So I feel like this is one that maybe got kind of skipped or passed over, and I'd like to rectify that. So if you haven't seen this one, again, give it a chance and then let me know what you think in the comments. And the last extra credit movie I want to talk about is The First Omen. The First Omen came out last year, 2024, and just missed my best top 10 of 24 list. Just missed it, honestly. I was sad to have to cut this movie because it was much better than I'd expected it being. It's directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who is another first-time film director, and she is knocking it out of the park with her feature film debut here, which is, of course, a prequel to the original Omen movie. So it is a tall order, something maybe you don't want to normally mess with, but she messed with it, and I'm glad she did because she really nailed this one and did a job better than anybody expected, I think. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie focuses on a nun coming to a new orphanage to try to, help out with kids and stuff like that. And when she gets there, she realizes things are a little bit weird. She makes friends with another nun, and she befriends this young child who's got some problems. But things start getting more and more strange. Deaths start happening, and there seems to be some sort of conspiracy amongst people in the church with the nuns and the priests that may be leading to something very sinister, possibly end of the world apocalyptic. But we're going to go ahead and stop there and not spoil that mystery and keep the surprise, even though hijinks do abound. And this movie, like I said, it's a prequel to The Omen, and it really has no business being this good. It really is surprising how well made this movie is and how good the story is. Now, I want to give Stevenson credit right off the bat because this movie looks great. It's got some money behind it, but it's interesting because this movie was originally slated to be streaming content. And because of I think it was the writer's strike, the studio had not enough movies to release, and so in the theaters, so they released this one theatrically, and it deserved it, and I think it did fairly well, and it again critically got a lot of good reviews, got really a lot of praise, really praised this movie, and with good reason because I think nobody was expecting it to be this strong. It's got really great visuals. It's paced pretty well. It's a little bit long, but it's paced pretty well. And it's got a really kind of a convoluted storyline that I still found to be really easy to understand and pretty intriguing in its way and how it's connecting into the original movie, The Omen. It is a prequel. It worked very, very well. Now, one of the things about this movie that was a little bit difficult is that it came out around the same time as the movie Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney movie that was very similar in tone and concept and imagery. And I don't want to go into that one too much because I'm going to talk about that one in the future. But they kind of maybe cannibalize each other. And I think Immaculate was probably the better receiver of the two. I think Immaculate did actually, I think, make my list of top 10 and push this one out because, again, they're so similar. I had to choose only one. But just because Immaculate was great shouldn't overshadow the fact that this movie is also great. It really is doing a great job of being a prequel while, with giving you callbacks to the original source material without doing it too ham-fissedly or too annoyingly. I can get really nitpicky about callbacks, and in this case, I thought they were done fairly well. Some of the imagery and events would be very clearly callbacks, but then there'd be a twist on it and stuff like that to make it feel a little different, and ultimately it just kind of worked. The performances in the movie worked. I think Stevenson drew out really good performances, especially among the younger actors. Did a really good job with that too. Some of the gore effects and stuff like that, pretty great. And again, the mystery was working for me. It really tied into the original movie really well in a way that made sense and was compelling. Now, admittedly, this time I'm kind of straining things a little bit to make the devil to be the main antagonist in this movie. Without spoiling things too much, the devil is not the only antagonist, but the motivations behind why things are happening and why the people who are antagonists are doing what they're doing is pretty fun, pretty interesting, pretty fascinating. I don't want to spoil it, of course. The devil is in the movie, though. And while it's kind of brief imagery, it's pretty cool looking. But the idea here of the devil as antagonist, and not antagonist in the movie sense I'm talking about, but like antagonist to the people in the movie, and as like the cult leader and as father of evil. This is like the classic concept of the devil. And so I wanted to kind of present this version of Satan. There is still a lot of rich material to be mined using the classic, normal, typical, stereotypical version of Satan. And this movie does it really, really well. Again, credit the filmmaker, credit the story, credit the sound design, the actors, the script, all of it. All of it's shockingly good. It really worked for me, and it delivered something that I didn't think I wanted, definitely didn't think I needed, and I'm really glad that I got. So once again, if you haven't seen this one, if you like the original Omen, I definitely check this one out. I think it's not better than the original movie, but it's a worthy companion piece to that movie for sure. And if they decide to keep exploring this world, I'm down for it. If you haven't seen The Omen, I'd say see The Omen before seeing this one. It might help a little bit, or you might appreciate this one a little bit more. But it's definitely, again, worth your time. All these movies, worth your time. So check it out. And again, let me know what you think. I'm guessing a lot of you saw this one because it did have a lot of good positive buzz, but I'd be interested in hearing your theories and your thoughts on it as well. So that's going to do it for our look into Satan horror movies about Satan. Like I said, there's so many to choose from. There's so many that I didn't even bring up, but these are ones that I like quite a bit that I thought merited some discussion. I wanted to talk about them, so I decided to bring them up. And hey, let me know in the comments other ones that you think that I should have brought up, or things that maybe I should check out. Hey, if I haven't seen it before, maybe I'll check it out and do a video about it. But right now, what I'm going to check out is this horror trivia pursuit card. This is that time of the video where I like to read a trivia pursuit card live on camera, try to answer it, hopefully not embarrass myself. And since we're talking about Satan, we're talking about kind of supernatural, paranormal stuff. Let's talk about the paranormal category. And the question is this. In 2012's The Woman in Black, what actor portrayed the only town resident to help Arthur Kipps? And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I don't know the answer to this question. I have no clue. So we have not talked about The Woman in Black on the channel yet, in terms of like doing a video on it. but we are going to. It's somewhere on the supplement. I'm not going to say where, but it's on the schedule. It's going to happen, and it's a good movie. And here's the thing, though, is I only know one actor from the movie, and it's Daniel Radcliffe, who plays Arthur Kipps. And the only reason I know that he plays Arthur Kipps is we got a few months back we got another question about the Woman in Black, and it identified Arthur Kipps as the main character, which is Daniel Radcliffe. So that's why I remember that. It's the only reason I remember the name. Otherwise, I'd have no clue. So because of the way the question is phrased, I know that the answer is not Daniel Radcliffe. So I have no idea. I have no idea who the other actor is. And so, like, I have no idea who the other actors are in the movie. So I'm going to be taking my best guess, and it's going to be literally a shot in the dark. I have no idea. So if you guys know the answer, lock it in or whatever. But if not, time to lock in a guess, because I'm not spending a lot of time prattling on, because I don't know. I have no idea. There's not even any deductive reasoning to do here. So I'm just going to take a shot in the dark. So lock in your answer. I'm about to give my answer, okay? So my answer is Rebecca Hall. And the only reason why is because I know she's in a lot of horror movies. I love her. I think she's great. And I think that I'm pretty sure she's not even in this movie, but I'm just taking a shot in the dark here. She's British, though. Hey, why not, right? So it feels like the kind of movie she would or should be in. So Rebecca Hall is my guess out in the, shot in the dark. And the answer is Kieran Hines. Kieran Hines, who I'm not terribly familiar with. And so, yeah, I did not get that right at all. That's, it is what it is. A little bit embarrassing, but I had no clue, guys. I had no clue. Did you get it right? And if you didn't get it right, who did you guess? Did you guess Rupert Grint? Because Rupert Grint was who I was going to say first. I knew for sure that wasn't right. Anyways, let me know bad answers or funny answers in the comments below. Again, also let me know cool Satan movies or just any cool movies that you're thinking about that maybe I should check out. Once again, if I check it out and I haven't seen it before, maybe I'll do a video on it next week or in the future. Not next week, because I got next week already planned out. And until next week, when I do what I have planned out, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.